Hi. So, my name's Adam. That was an awesome introduction. First up, a huge thank you, obviously, to everyone at Weapons of Mass Creation, everyone here, the sponsors, all the volunteers, Jeff and Joseph. You guys are amazing. And I'm excited to see what this thing turns into in the future when it starts happening in other states and people like us get to take it over. So, my name's Adam. I'm from Portland, Oregon. He already said it. I'm an art director, illustrator, designer. I also teach at Portland State with my friends Kate Bingham and Burt and Will Bryant and Jason Sturgill. I was initially going to do my talk about fear. I believe that's what I told you. I was like, oh yeah, I want to talk about fear. And then I got really scared. And I'm serious. I got too scared. And it was awesome seeing Jen and Omar's talk. And I didn't get to stand up because I was tearing up and I didn't want anyone to see at the end. It was a great talk about vulnerability and openness. That is so important, especially now when we're out here. Like, this whole thing is kind of confusing, I think, kind of navigating and figuring out your path within all this stuff. And to be open and to be honest and to be vulnerable is where I think the path kind of becomes clear. So I have a studio in Portland called The Pressure. Here's a poster I made a while back. And right now it's just me. It's super nimble. And it's an intern, and someone else that's coming on the way to work with me the next couple weeks. I'm really excited. We do stuff for clients large and small, Nike, Nickelodeon, Target stuff, as well as doing all we can to support local brands, sometimes pro bono work, some nonprofit work, and teaching. And in teaching, one thing that I talk about a lot is this idea, and Alonzo touched on this morning, Alonzo, if you're here, the idea that design isn't everything for us. I think the idea of someone being a multifaceted individual is incredibly important, and this idea that everything that isn't design about you is kind of the thing that, to me, is the most interesting. Like, those are the parts that flesh you out and make you a person with a unique point of view. And when I was first kind of starting the pressure thing years ago, when I was working in other jobs and trying to do it freelance, I wanted to have this ambiguous term. So it could be a record label, or it could be, I could throw events, or I could do anything I wanted through it. And over time, it kind of turned more into a design studio. But at the very beginning, I used this idea of the diamond. It's pretty obvious. Pressure's good for you. There's a diamond. But because that thing is so cliche, the diamond, I kind of flipped it up, and it ended up becoming this kind of dream catcher mandala. So this is an overhead view of a diamond. And now what this represents to me is that kind of filter or lens that we talk about. So this is the kind of critical design lens by which the world enters us as creative people, and hopefully in which we enter the world through our work. So I'm gonna run through basically this thing. I'm gonna run through my story quickly, hopefully, and then I'm gonna get into a little bit of work, and then I'm gonna talk about some stuff right now that I'm like incredibly vibing on, stuff that inspires me, things I'm doing outside of design that are getting me hyped, and finding that it all kind of weaves together. So that's me on the right, that's my mom on the left. So growing up, I'm an only child, raised with a single mother, common story nowadays. Things were really tough, broke a lot, sleeping in cars, sometimes in motels. But through all of it, my mom instilled that idea of pressure being good for you, right? So everything's gonna be okay, everything's gonna be all right, just work hard, be optimistic. And she kind of shielded me from a lot of the bad stuff that happens when you grow up incredibly broke. Mom. It is awesome. Being an only child and having it kind of rough, find a way to escape through things like this. D&D. Anyone? And the thing that I love about these like role-playing games from a young age is it's inherently collaborative and participatory. And I didn't know that at the time, obviously, I can talk about it now. But it's a way to you sit around with a bunch of people, you create stories, it's all in your imagination. You get to craft these narratives from beginning to end with a group of people that have, an introduction and an actual plot and a conclusion, and it teaches you how to tell stories and how to work with other people. And you get to draw characters and create worlds. And I think the idea of world building and storytelling is something that I've loved since I was a wee tot, right? And how cool is that? It's a fucking dragon. So my mom ended up, she said, I'm gonna go back to school. I'm gonna go to medical school, be able to support you for the first time. This is when I was like in junior high school. I didn't really know what was going on. So we moved to Minneapolis from Rochester, where I was originally from. And she went to school at the University of Minnesota to be a doctor, which was awesome. She was in school for 13 years, which is a very long time, big ups. But while I was there, when I was 15 or 16 years old, I came across hip-hop. So I came across graffiti, I came across dancing, this whole world of kind of like the indie hip-hop movement, which is all DIY, it's all collaborative, it's all people supporting each other like this, where we throw events and people from all different kind of walks would come together, where you're indie rock or whether you're a rapper or whether you do folk music. We'd bring everyone together because we knew that to support our scene was the best thing you could possibly do. It's like we're in this garden and we want the whole garden to grow, not just our plant surrounded by weeds. It's a weird analogy. But also with the graffiti, you know, from a young age, writing letters. So this idea of letter forms has kind of been a part of me for a long, long time. Take it in. So this is a form of dancing that I got really into through graph and through hip hop. And on the left, these are the electric boogaloos. And on the right, these are the original lockers from LA. Getting really into this dance form, something that resonated with me was that it was like being a part of a subculture in a subculture. We had our own language, we had our own movements, and then within it, you had this structure by which you had to find your own way to be an individual or be distinctive within this structure that already exists. And I think this is very much like, you know, kind of trying to find your own identity now as a creative person. And it's just so fun. Look it up. So in Minneapolis, starting to work with all these people, you know, also common story. Everyone's into music, and we're all working with each other. I didn't know what graphic design was at the time, so I went and bought a computer and got this software, started teaching myself programs. And you start designing stuff for friends, like many of us have done. And after designing a couple CDs, I got a call from the CD company called Noiseland, and they said, hey, we'd love you to come in and be our in-house designer. And I was young at the time. This is before I went back to school. I was psyched, so we went there and had the opportunity to work with a lot of musicians who were putting stuff out for the very first time, teaching them about visual identity and what a visual identity or, I guess, a cohesive aesthetic across multiple media is for a person that makes music. And designed hundreds and hundreds of CDs, and many of them are really bad. So I'm not going to show any. I didn't do any of these. This is just to represent the pile. And after that, something happened. My mother, after she graduated from med school, after 13 years, she was about to take her residency, and then unfortunately she had a stroke, and all her memory went away. And she's getting it back. She's still in a foster home in Minnesota. But you know, it was pretty difficult, and there was a point in my early 20s where I had a path that I wanted to follow, and I had to kind of throw it away and start over. And instead of just doing what I thought I was supposed to do, I had to do something that I really wanted to do. And this was kind of like a crux point of my life. So I decided to go back to school on my own after going to a couple other schools and failing out of one. And I went to MCAD and blasted through there in 3 years. And the things that, anyone here from MCAD? It's Dylan. I know that whoop anywhere. So the thing about MCAD, the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, you know, it's very much a kind of Bauhaus-oriented school, and they teach you how to think, like any school should do. They teach you how to learn. It's the idea that the aesthetic hopefully follows the concept and the process. And for me, I was there for design and illustration at the time. So in illustration, I kind of had a style that I was playing with, but I was pretty bad. And then in design, it's trying to get you away from style and aesthetic and trying to teach you to let the process guide you. And it was really difficult trying to balance those things, and I think it's something that I still deal with today. But that thinking of letting the process guide you and create things that come out of the concept visually and hopefully surprise yourself and hopefully surprise a client in a great way is kind of what I got out of this school, as well as a lot of awesome homies like Dylan. And after graduating, the day we graduated, I thought everything was going to be roses and sunshine. And then I left and realized I didn't have a job. And I started freaking out, and I called my friend Sky, who works at this record label called Rhymesayers, and I said, hey, can I be your art director? And they're like, we don't really need an art director. And I talked them into it. And it's like what Nick was just saying about actually asking. That's all it took was a question. Luckily, there was a relationship already there. But I got really lucky to be able to work with Rhymesayers when I first graduated and work back in this music world. Got to do my first photo art direction right out of school. Got to work with artists like MF Doom and Atmos, which are great. And also, this was during the decline of record labels, or of like the, record labels and physical distribution. And we had to figure out ways to create packages that actually resonated with people so they'd want to keep them around when they could just download an MP3. And it was really difficult, and we experimented a lot. But over these couple years, we found ways to try to add value to a thing like a package. Some art direction stuff the last 6 years for a music conference in Minneapolis called Soundset, which came out of that Rhymesayers thing. And then I got to work with this company called Burlesque in Minneapolis. If you don't know them, check it out. And for me, this was important because it ended up being an experiment and process as well. Working with guys like Wes and Mike Davis at Burlesque, who have a totally different process and had been around a long time longer than I had, and were kind of like mentors to me. It was just an amazing thing. They're fantastic, and Wes is kind of backwards. He doesn't have a traditional kind of design process, so he would just throw a bunch of stuff in Photoshop and create a file that was like 8 gigs and would play around until he thought it was right. And it was always gorgeous, and it was nothing that me or anyone that I knew would ever come to as far as a final execution. So that idea of letting other people's processes into yourself and letting it kind of play with your own is really important. Towards the end of that tenure, a couple years after school, I realized that I needed a real job. Like, I wanted something that had structure. I wanted something like an agency job, and I wanted to get towards this idea of like comprehensive brand thinking. And I ended up getting a gig at 160/90 in Philly, which was great. Whoop, whoop. And while there, we worked with a lot of cultural institutions. In the upper left, it's a brand we did for the Woodmere Art Museum, stuff for the University of Dayton, and I even got to design a mascot, which I found out after we made it and I left the company. They changed the face because kids thought it was too creepy. And it's pretty creepy, I guess. That's for the Wilkes-Barre Colonel. Wilkes-Barre Colonel. I don't know how to say Wilkes-Barre. Also got to design a chair. So this was for Design Within Reach in Philadelphia. And 160/90 gave us the opportunity. They said, we're going to do this thing with this contest for Design Within Reach, and anyone that wants to pitch an idea for it can. And I said it would be great. I've been playing with this kind of calligraphic script for a while. It's kind of the way I write with a brush pen. I would love to see this on a product because I've never really made a product before. And they were cool enough to make it, and it won the thing, which was dope. And then Design Within Reach was supposed to go on and make thousands of them, and then they didn't. So that, and I get it. I get why not. I mean, it's a classic Polistano chair, and yeah, I mean, I understand. But, you know, it's kind of heartbreaking. Whatever. I'm okay. But this idea of playing with products got me thinking about product design and about things that are functional, that have an aesthetic that you can imbue design into from concept to execution. And I was about to quit and move back to Minneapolis, and I got a kind of lucky call from Nike in Portland, and they said, hey, we saw this chair, and we're looking for, it was like on my site, we're looking for someone to come and do graphics for shoes. And I'd never been a sneaker dude, still not. Really, but I knew that it would be an incredible experience because Nike is this insane design-driven company, and I thought I'd go there and be there for a couple years and bounce and maybe move back to Minneapolis. So I made the move out to Portland. Any Portlanders? All right. So I made the move out to Portland, and Portland's an amazing city. While there, starting at Nike, got to work on all sorts of shoes, which was absolutely incredible. I was a graphic designer working with a bunch of industrial designers, which I'd never worked with before, and getting to see their process actually every single thing has to have function. So any design decision that you make needs to have a reason to be there, which is reflected in the colors and the materials and the graphics. And that was something that I'd never really thought of before. A lot of it was just based on aesthetic, and it changed the way that I think about design and think about objects and materials. So that was cool. But after about a year and a half, I'd done tons of shoes, and I was like, man, I'm kind of tired of shoes. It's fun, but there's so much more that I'm interested in creatively and artistically. But first, I made a move over to Nike brand design, where we did different stuff. Oh, here's a shoe. We did different, oh, and here's a shoe I did for Kanye, sorry. So maybe I move it over to a Nike brand design, where we worked on stuff like the Nike Fuel Band and actually creating the visual identity for something that is this abstract concept, which is Nike Fuel. I don't know if any of you guys wear a Fuel Band or know anything about this, but this is a thing that quantifies your daily kind of data, right? Everything that you do. It has all sorts of, like, I don't know what they're called, accelerometers in it and all this other stuff that tracks the way that you do things, kind of like Joules with energy, but it's a proprietary kind of thing called Fuel. And our task was to communicate it to the widest audience as possible, which is incredibly difficult. And after 6 months, we did it. We designed the package. We did some copywriting for it, and it ended up coming out. So that was an incredible learning experience. But after that, I was just worn out. We worked really, really hard. It was great to be there, but I knew that inside I still wanted to go and do my own thing, even though I didn't know how successful it was going to be. So I left Nike. I still have relationships with them. It's great. It's a great company. But I bounced, and I've been doing my own studio, The Pressure, for the last 2 years. It's been really fun. Here's our little space where we built our own desks. It's a co-working space in Portland, Oregon, in the basement of a coffee shop, which keeps us way too hyper all the time. It's called Barista. It's delicious. I think, so the cool thing about this space is I used to dance, and when I first came in, I was like, something feels really good about this space. It was the wooden floors and the mirrors, and I found out that before we moved in, it was a b-boy studio. I think Greg used to dance there, right? Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was awesome. So sometimes I close the doors and the windows when everyone's gone and get down a little bit, but not too much, because I'm old. So we do stuff like this. This is for a local store called Pacific North Fresh. It's a gift shop, some branding and art direction for it in store. There's a calligraphic mural for Target at their headquarters. So when you walk into the Target gym in Minneapolis, there's this big mural that's facing you, full of calligraphic, inspirational words to get you psyched to pump some iron, or whatever, or leap like she's doing. Their leaping area. Some music art direction, some illustration, editorial illustration, Doomtree. It's a collaborative zine that I did with Portland State University before I started working, which was really fun, getting more and more into collaborative projects where you kind of create this scaffolding by which a bunch of people can get together and create something larger than an individual, called Movement Moments, about the future of design. Stuff for Target. This is a man wearing a dog suit jumping. This is played at Target Arena. So it like introduces this guy, it's like a bullseye, and then all this stuff happens. Trust me. It's my editorial illustration for Red Bull. This is about the end of dance in New York. And you can see through all this, like, there's a lot of different kind of aesthetic stuff happening. And it's kind of like what I was talking about with school. Like, rather than just have one kind of aesthetic, it's fun to bounce and play and stretch and try to find your boundaries and surprise yourself and surprise the clients. And a lot of these start as sketches, and by the time they're actually accepted, they're very different than the way that they started. And I think when people sign up with the studio, sign up with me, sometimes they know that. Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards. Shout out Dan Dixon. Whoop, whoop. And this is something I recently did for some friends of mine who are musicians in Seattle. And again, nothing like I'd ever done. I wanted to play with abstraction and play with form and shape to challenge myself, which is something I hope we all keep doing, right? Challenging ourselves and trying new things to keep ourselves excited. But this thing was kind of important to me because the album itself was supposedly about creative people, or just people in general, being confused and being disoriented. And a lot of it had to do with social media and trying to be a creative person or a musician in this mass inundation of other people doing stuff. And you try to find your own way in this this chaos and trying to, constantly comparing and contrasting yourself with other people, which is really tough. And things like this where you can actually, I just spit, where you can actually get a bunch of people together and say hi is really, really important. And I think this kind of directly relates to that. Like, how do you find yourself in this mess that we kind of all exist in? And how do you have your own voice? And how do you still have that vulnerability and that openness to walk up to someone and say, hey, I dig your work, or hey, this thing that you did is awesome, or those things that actually have those human connections that we've been talking about a lot today, like grace, which we were talking about with openness, was great, and the idea of vulnerability and the idea of being able to actually say real things to people is important. And another thing is, I guess, finding those things, like at the beginning, talking about other interests that we have, the things that affect you as a person outside of design, or the things that you filter out your interests and go into design. So here's some things right now that kind of keep me balanced outside of just making shit constantly, that get me really, really inspired. And I'm right now probably as enthusiastic about design and creativity and this kind of stuff as I was 10 years ago when I was just going back to school. And I just want to share. So I did not design this book. This is a book called Truth in Comedy. This is by Del Close, who's the creator of the modern form of kind of like long-form improv. And I've been taking improvisational acting classes to get out of myself and to try to get a little more open and I guess find my path. It's kind of the way I meditate. And if any of you do improv or don't, what it is it's you get together with a bunch of people. When you start, you don't know. You have to establish trust with these people. You have to unfold yourself in front of these people, and it's not like yoga, not like literally unfold yourself, but as a being, unfold yourself, and learn to trust them and exist as a team and kind of riff. And for me, it was like the perfect mixture of it's like freestyle rap and D&D put together with a bunch of people you don't know. So that's I think maybe why I love it. But I thought it was going to be about being funny. And when I first went to improv, I'm like, oh, I can be funny. I'm kind of witty. And I found out in this book that it's not about trying to be funny at all. It's about trying to create real relationships with people and create conversations and stories by which, over time, if you keep something going long enough, become interesting or sad or dramatic or funny, because the truth is actually the thing that resonates. And so I'm still, searching. I'm still trying to figure things out, but improv has been a big thing for me that's helping clear my mind and meditate. And the other thing is etymology. Etymology is the history of words, and I've always been interested in history, and I've always been interested in, I think specifically about etymology is like this visual twist that happens to words over time where you have stuff like this. So this is a recent illustration on the site, it's illustratedetymology.com. These are a bunch of pieces apart, and then they snap together. And this comes from the word algebra. I think, I don't know, pronouncing it incorrectly, but it's an Arabic word that means a reunion of broken parts, and it's where the modern word algebra comes from. So things like this just get me stoked, because you find the history of the meaning of the word, and it kind of functions on different levels. Like for me, this site is a way to create a collaborative project that can keep going, that people can learn from, and I can learn from, and I'm stoked on every single time I get a response in my email. But it also tells you about the history of the word. So it tells you that algebra and mathematics have a strong Arabic or Middle Eastern foundation, which is true. And it also talks to that visual twist, which is so interesting. Some other ones. So this is a New York-based illustrator, Joshua Wiley. This is the word avocado. Avocado literally in Aztec, in the language Nahuatl, means testicle. Yeah, you get it. You put that together. The word bikini comes from the Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands, where the A-bomb was tested during World War II. And supposedly, when the bikini first came out after World War II, it had that same effect on men. So that's why it's called the bikini. This is by Jason Sturgill, Portland guy. It's so good. I just love this so much. This stuff gets me so hyped. I feel like a little kid. The word berserk comes from an Old Norse word that literally means bear shirt. Because the Norse warriors would wear the skin of bears to summon their energy and to embody the spirit of the bear before going into battle, going into war. So that's not what the shirts looked like back then. They didn't have the screen printing technology. But we play with these visual twists. There's a Portland-based illustrator, Nick Stokes. The word color comes from the Latin word kolos, which literally means covering. So it's this idea of these tribal people wearing this covering. The word mascot comes from the French word mascotte, with 2 T's and an E. I can't pronounce it because I don't speak French, which means a talisman or a charm. So the word mascot, the original meaning was that by having this thing when you're playing your sport of choice, it represented you, and it was a talisman that would help you achieve success. And this is by my guy, Will Bryant, for the word salary, which comes from the Latin word salarium, which literally means how much a soldier is paid for 1 day's work in salt, because throughout history, salt has been incredibly important, especially as a form of currency before money existed. And there's a book called Salt that's great. If you guys get a chance to read it, check it out. So I think in all of this, it kind of bounced around a little bit, but in all this, it's I found that even though things are going well, relatively with the studio, still really confused. Like, I don't know what's going to happen next at all. I'm hoping things are going to be better, but we all know, like, it's a roller coaster. I was just talking to Liz and Gavin about this. Like, success is totally subjective. It's all a roller coaster, and I'm just trying to find this kind of like meaning or value in everything that I do, and I'm finding that the things outside of design are the places that I find the meaning and value. There's this C.S. Lewis quote, reason is the organ of truth, and imagination is the organ of meaning. And I'm thinking on this a lot and trying to figure it out for me in all this stuff. But thank you. The pressure is good for you. I have some bags. You're appreciated.